Hey there, this is Ross Izzard, and this is the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast, where we talk about fly fishing in more interesting places. This is the final episode of Season 5 of the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast, which is really kind of a crazy thing, to be honest with you. I started this podcast back in 2024 with just sort of a harebrained idea that maybe somebody would give a shit about me being a dirtbag, backpacking all over the place and looking for fish in remote places. I was encouraged by friends to set it up. I just thought, man, nobody's going to care about this. And here we are. We're at the end of our 5th season. We've published more than 60 episodes, which is kind of wild. And we've covered everything from psychology to philosophy to safety and gear to obviously fishing and fishing tactics and everything else. And it has been an absolute blast. This has been one of those projects that I feel like I say this every season, but it really has caught me off guard with how successful it's been, frankly, and how many of you have this sort of same passion for remote places, wilderness, and these wild areas where we can go and catch these beautiful fish on a fly rod. So that has been just incredible to watch, both as far as the growth of the podcast and as far as the growth of the community behind the podcast. So that has been so fun. I have loved hearing from all you guys on Instagram through the DMs, on email through backcountryflyfishingpodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure I've missed some of you on Facebook or some other platforms, and I'll talk more about that here in a few minutes. But in any case, there has been tremendous involvement from you all. Everything from tips to stories to accolades to, yes, some criticisms, which, by the way, I appreciate those. And it's just been so cool to watch. And these are folks from all over the country and in some cases all over the world, which is pretty wild, actually. We've now had something in the neighborhood of about 40,000 people hop on the podcast. And that is spread out across 29 different countries, which is pretty crazy. Now, listen, we live in a world where there are bots, and so I don't know that these are all necessarily definitely real people. But I can tell you that a lot of them are, because I've heard from them and they're engaging with the content. 820 different cities all over the place. So, I mean, this is pretty cool. We've basically spanned the whole globe as far as folks who are interested and involved in this backcountry fly fishing thing and who love to marry our love for the outdoors and outdoor stuff, backpacking, hiking, camping, survival, all of that stuff in with fly fishing. And that is just so incredibly gratifying to watch. So I first and foremost want to close out this season with just a huge thank you to all of you for listening, for sharing your insights, for engaging with the show, for sharing it with your friends, for helping it get out there. And it really has turned from just sort of a side thing for me into a real passion project. And that is largely because I'm just so energized by how many of you are fired up about this. And it's just been incredible to watch. So thank you guys. Thank you for tuning in. It really, really means a lot to me. If you have not had a chance to write a review on Spotify or Apple or wherever you happen to listen, please do that. It really does help. I want you to be honest in those reviews. 5-star reviews are great. If you're going to leave something less than 5 stars, that's cool too, as long as it's honest and you tell me what's wrong. I really would like for you to tell me what I could do better, because as this thing grows, that becomes more and more important. I want it to serve you, I want it to serve something greater than just me speaking into a microphone and hoping that somebody's listening. So if you hadn't had a chance to do that, please do. Share it with your friends, share it with your angling buddies. Reach out to me if you would like. I'm always happy to chat. I'm actually having lunch with a fan here in just a couple of weeks, and I'm very happy to meet up with any of you who happen to be in the area. So feel free to give me a poke, and in the meantime, keep doing what you're doing, because it has been truly awesome. Now, on that same front, we are, as I said, at the end of Season 5, and we've had some really fun episodes this season, at least for me. They were fun for me to talk about and fun for me to record. Everything from an episode about being thankful and grateful for what we have on the river and our responsibility to these places to keep them safe and preserve them, to a conversation about knots, to a complaint corner about guides who maybe haven't exactly earned the title of guide, to a series of really interesting interviews with nonprofits and others who are out there doing the work of conservation every single day to make sure that these wild places stay wild and stay pristine for generations to come. And then we also talked about some other stuff, right? We talked about fly tying and why fly tying is so important, and we are going to talk more about that in the future. I talked a lot about my trip last fall to Mongolia, including a conversation with Peter Fong at Mongolia River Outfitters, which is the outfitting group that made that trip possible. If you are interested in that trip, I'm going to put a plug in here again. No, they're not paying me for this. It was an incredible experience, and if you are looking to get to Mongolia to check that off your bucket list, don't wait. Give Peter a shout. His email is in the show notes. Go back, check out that episode, give them a shout. That is definitely worth it. And then a whole bunch of other stuff. Indicator nymphing, the psychology of the cold, a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, we had a smattering, a veritable smattering of things that we talked about in season 5. And I really, really enjoyed that. I think you guys did too. I heard from a lot of you that you liked a lot of the episodes. That's awesome. It's always great to know that we're hitting the mark as far as relevance and the stuff that we're talking about. So we'll work on keeping that up. But also, I wanted to throw in the fact that I sort of owe you all a little bit of an apology for the back half of this season. And I've said this before on a previous episode, but it's worth saying again. I work in politics. This podcast does not pay my bills, and probably never will, which is fine. And so I have a business that works in politics, specifically legislative politics, and state legislative session starts in January, which means that this is my craziest time of year. And as a result, as our country and the political arena in our country has gotten crazier, my upload schedule has gotten a little bit more erratic. So we have had sort of change from pretty consistent posting every single Friday to sometimes posting on a Saturday. In this case, this is actually going to go up on a Sunday. And in one case, I think we actually missed a week, which was the first time that's ever happened, and hopefully the last time it ever will happen. But I wanted to let you guys know that I see that. I know that most of you probably don't deeply care about whether the episode publishes on Friday or Saturday or Sunday or Monday, but I care about consistency because I know this is something that matters to a lot of you. A lot of you tune in weekly, and that means a lot to me. And I want to do a better job of staying on schedule in the future. So to that end, we are working on some really interesting stuff for season 6. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the road ahead. So the first thing is we're going to do a little bit of a change in structure starting in season 6. So far, you might have noticed we've been sticking mostly to sort of a 12-episode cycle where we have an intro and an outro episode and then 10 episodes in the middle where we talk about stuff. And a few of those episodes are usually interviews. We're going to stick to that pretty firmly, but we're also going to switch just a tiny bit to running 10-episode seasons, which I think is going to give us a chance to really do a bit more of a deep dive on many of these issues that we care about. We're still going to keep the interviews. We're still going to keep Complaint Corner. There's still going to be the basic structure that you all are used to, but we are going to bring that to 10 episodes per season. And then I would like to shorten the gap between seasons. So most of you know that in general, we run seasons for 12 weeks, and then we have about 2 months off. And that's going to be the same case here. We will be back with season 6 in early April. But then going forward, I would really like to condense those seasons a tiny bit and then reduce that gap a little bit so that we are able to spend more time on air with all of you. Have appreciated the notes that I've gotten from folks that they miss it when this isn't going up every week. I hear you. And so I'm hoping that this change in structure will allow us to ultimately get more stuff out there, even if the seasons themselves are a tiny bit shorter. Related to that, next season we are going to start, I hope, exploring the concept of video in our podcast. Now, this has been an interesting development. As most of you know, I record this actually in a home studio, and it works okay. But we are looking at making a move to recording sort of more professionally in an actual studio that would include the ability for us to offer video. And in addition to subjecting you to my ugly mug when we're talking about stuff, if you prefer a video format for your podcast, I think that's also going to open up a lot of horizons for us as far as dynamic interviews with folks, the ability to demonstrate certain things, show you pieces of gear, and a whole bunch of other stuff that you really just can't do in an audio-only format. So I'm pretty excited about that. We're still hammering out the details of that. Obviously, studio space costs money. This is really not a money-making endeavor for me, as most of you know, but we are working on that, and I'm hoping that we will have a solution that could look like a partnership that would allow us to really expand our video production capabilities and start really upping our game on that front. In addition, of course, to all the awesome photography and videography and general stuff that we do on Instagram. So keep a lookout for that. On that note, I should mention that we are going to, well, really, I should say, already have discontinued for now the Facebook page for the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast. That's not because I don't love you on Facebook. It's not because the Facebook page had a problem. It's just because trying to keep up with social media for both can be a lot. Candidly, most of you are on Instagram. Instagram is a little bit easier of a platform to work with. And so while I would like to get back to Facebook at some point in the near future, it's going to be a little bit neglected for a little while, which means that Instagram and email are going to continue being the best way to get to me if you would like to chat. At some point, maybe we will get back to being able to post across multiple social platforms. I would really like that. But for now, IG is it. And so I will see you guys over there if you care to engage or follow the crazy antics that we have going on here at the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about partnerships. As the podcast has gotten bigger, I've had some folks approach me about the potential of partnerships with their brands. And that's been an interesting conversation because when I started the podcast, I never had any intention of it going that direction, which is sort of a story as old as time. So, who cares, right? But I have held a line for a long time that I don't want to be another one of those fly fishing shows with 17 commercials throughout, 20 minutes of ads over the course of an hour-long podcast. You hear an ad at the beginning, an ad at the end, an ad every 5 minutes. I don't want to be that. And fortunately, I have a day job that pays my bills, so I don't really need to be that. And beyond that, I have too much respect for what we're doing and the importance of doing it right and safely to go out and start grabbing up partnerships and endorsing gear that I don't really trust. And so we've been working pretty hard on a series of guiding principles for how these partnerships might work. And I'm going to share those in more detail with you all in the near future. So keep an eye out for that because I always want to be transparent about when there are partnerships involved, why we're okay with that, and what they look like so that you're never having to wonder if me trying to sell you a backpack or a fly rod or something is just because that person paid my bills. So I'm going to kind of be very transparent about that. You will have more to come on that front. But know this, sort of as a starting place. I will never, ever endorse gear or a brand that I have not personally used, personally interacted with, and that I personally trust, right? Especially with the stuff that we're doing. When you're way off in the sticks, you're 10 or 15 miles into something, especially if you're by yourself. But even if you're not, there's just not room for crappy Instagram, glitzy influencer gear, right? You got to have stuff that works and stuff that you can trust in really harsh environments to keep you safe and get you back to your family and your home alive and well after your backcountry adventures. So just know out of the gate that as we think about that stuff, I'm coming at that primarily as an outdoorsman, somebody who takes this extremely seriously, and we're never going to be the let's see who writes the biggest check and we'll go with them guys. If we ever talk about it on the podcast, it'll be because that stuff works, and I will always be honest first when it comes to that. So stay tuned on that front. There'll be more here in the very near future, but it is something that I wanted to raise as we're talking about the road ahead. And then I just wanted to provide a quick sort of, teaser of what I'm expecting in season 6. So as I mentioned, we'll be starting in early April, most likely, which is really kind of the beginning of good season for backcountry fly fishing. Now, this is kind of tricky, as you all know from listening to the podcast. April is when the freestones start opening back up. It might be earlier this year out west because the snowpack has been so terrible. But in general, things start opening up in April, and then you get hit with runoff in May and June, and so you have this kind of golden window, and then things get complicated. But it's also the beginning of the warm enough season for us to start really thinking about getting out there, hiking, backpacking, camping, doing all that stuff. And I have heard from quite a few of you that you love the fishing tips, you love the fly tying, and all of that, and of course we're going to keep talking about that, but also that you really would like to hear more about the non-fishing aspects of backcountry fly fishing, like tents and camping and backpacking gear and tips and safety and all of that kind of stuff. And we have touched that a little bit in previous episodes. We have one about packing for self-reliance. It's a theme, obviously, that I care about deeply and that I've touched on many, many times over the course of the last 5 seasons. But we're going to start doing a little bit more of a deep dive into some of that stuff in season 6 because I think it's worth its own conversation. A lot of that stuff is a hobby and a gear matrix in its own right, and that's worth us talking about, especially for those of you who are either just getting into this or maybe just looking to level up your game. That's worth talking about. So we're going to be having more of those conversations in season 6, in addition to Complaint Corner, philosophical discussions, fishing stuff, all the good stuff that makes the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast good. And then the very last thing that I want to throw out there is that there is the possibility of me hosting a couple of trips over the course of the next year or so. A couple of those might be international trips, so there is the potential for a trip maybe to Patagonia. There might be a trip elsewhere too. Those are still firming up, but also the possibility of hosting some trips here in the U.S., and so if you would be interested in that, now I'm going to stop short here of saying it's definitely going to happen because, as you know, this is a bootstrap podcast and this stuff kind of takes time. So not going to say for sure that I want you to sign up today. But if you would be interested in taking a trip, and maybe it's a several night backpacking trip to a high alpine lake, maybe it is getting on an airplane and going somewhere exciting, but whatever it might look like, if that's something that you'd be interested in, shoot me a note. Because it would really be helpful for me to know whether or not y'all would be interested in doing something like that. I've gotten so used to fishing alone that I just sort of assume that that's the way it is. And me being me, I assume that most people would rather not hang out with me on purpose unless they're being paid to do so. But I might be wrong about that. So if you would ever be interested in that, or if it seems like something that maybe you would possibly be interested in the future, drop me a line either on Instagram or at backcountryflyfishingpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you, and we can kind of take it from there. And with that, guys, that really rounds out season 5 here. Thank you for being here again. Thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the winter fishing season. I think you've got all the tools and the tricks and the tips that you need to have a successful February and March. And then we will be back here in April to start talking about, thank God, the warmer months when we can finally start fly fishing properly again. Until then, guys, please stay safe, take care of yourselves, stay on the water, be good, and I'll see you back here this spring. Till next time, this is Ross. Maybe I'll see you out there. Or maybe I'll just see you here for season 6.